When you're looking for a solicitor to deal with your case, you don't just look for any solicitor, you look for the right solicitor. An expert who knows what he's doing can deal with your case the right way, achieving the best results. OBASEKI Solicitors has more than 100 years of specialist experience serving the local community in immigration law, property law, human rights legislation, civil and criminal litigation, family law, employment law, Sharia law, business law, maritime and commercial law, providing professional legal services globally in Africa, Asia and Europe. Be assured we'll be able to deal with your case the absolute right way with results. So, contact us today by phone on 020-7739-7549 or go online at www.legalpal.com.
Yes. Good evening. Welcome once again to Truth and Justice TV. I've missed you all. Thank you for joining me once again. And today I have a very, very special guest with me. We're going to be looking at health and culture. You might sit down and say, what has culture got to do with health? How we eat, how we act, all of these things impact actually on our health. And we're in a foreign country, yes, we're originally from Africa. Well, I am, via Tottenham, but anyway. But still, though I'm here, I still have my cultural food that I eat. I still sort of carry out certain things to do with my faith, spending long times in church on Sundays. But how do all of these things, our faith, all these things impact on our health? Today, I have an expert in the house to talk to you about these and also women's issues. So if you're a woman and you've had a bit of a niggling pain here or there, I'm going to be talking about our curvy and wobbly bits. And if you're a man and you have a woman or a sister, whoever, daughter, you might want to pay a little bit of attention so that you know how to best understand some of their issues. And my special guest, without further ado, is Miss Ruth Oshikanlu, MBE.
Oh, Jen.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I'm so honoured to have you on the show.
I'm honoured to be here too. It's a great privilege.
Now, many of them out there may not know who you are, and I did say yes, MBE, most recently awarded for some excellent work, I must say. Please let the audience know who you are.
I'm Ruth Oshikanlu. I'm a nurse, midwife, health visitor. I am passionate about health from before conception right through to the grave. And I also believe in prevention and early intervention. Often when we ignore our health, what happens? It impacts negatively, and we need further support. So it was for this I was awarded for my services and contribution to community nursing, for services to children and families. Yes.
Now, you make it sound so simple, but when it comes down to helping advise on government policy, writing very interesting course notes for frontline professionals, and an excellent book, which I would love our audience to see, Tune Into Your Baby. Yes. So you did say you're passionate about healthcare, but you've taken it to a much, much higher level, from being right there at the grassroots with mums, right up there to advising government on policy. And that's amazing. We salute you.
Thank you.
So one of the things I would say is, what would you say to those frontline professionals that are out there that feel a bit challenged? I always say that when you're a nurse and you're coming into the UK maybe from abroad, or you're from a different culture, what you actually have to add to the NHS is so much multiplied because of your richness of your life experience. So what do you say to those nurses out there that feel, okay, oh, my experience is not relevant, or I'm not sure I should just try to take that step up the ladder? What would you say to them?
In fact, who I am today is because of my childhood experiences. I grew up in Nigeria, and I observed from a very young age how women and girls were treated, and that's where a lot of the passion stems from. A lot of young girls are not educated. I was privileged to have parents that valued
education.
education of girls and young women. So it was that. It's actually that has shaped my career, because we know in Nigeria there's a lot of patriarchy. Well, in a lot of African countries, and women's rights are often ignored. Their needs are often ignored. So that's what has actually shaped me. When I came to the UK, I had to observe, and it wasn't easy. It was really challenging at first, but I had to focus on what difference I wanted to make. My grandma had always, from a young age, always said, try to make a difference, try to live
I like that.
a legacy. We have a short time on earth. By the time we finish and live our life, be remembered for the difference you've made. And so I've always tried my best to see beyond the challenge and try to understand why the challenges exist. And because once you get a better understanding, then you can know how best to respond to those challenges. So to any nurse, midwife who's undergoing any challenges,
Or even foreign doctors.
yes, or foreign doctors too, focus on your why. I always say, if you have a purpose, then it makes it easier. Focus on the reasons and the difference you want to make to those that you serve. And it's often one of service, even though later you become a leader, but you have to learn to be a servant first. And that's how I've grown in my profession.
Wonderful. That also applies to you caregivers out there.
Yes.
You're so highly valued. The work you do is, I must say, invaluable. And this is coming from me that has had a child that had to go into early care and a mother that is disabled. So I know about you frontline care workers, and I am truly, truly passionate about what you do. And the fact that many of you that come from different backgrounds, again, have so much more to give. We're growing older, and we talk about us women, yes, coming from a patriarchal society, but us matriarchs here,
Yes.
some of us are single mums running households and empires, and we often forget ourselves. Most recently, there was the survey out there about women not going for smears. We're not going for our smear tests. Can we have a little talk about that? The checks that women should be carrying out. And guys, if you're listening, please, it's about supporting the women in your household to go for these important health checks.
One thing you need to be doing regularly is breast examinations, and often women avoid that. And then, as you mentioned, cervical smear test. A few years ago, there was Jade Goody who died from a young lady that died from cervical cancer. And immediately after that, the rates of smear test, the uptake went up. Or over time, people are not doing smears anymore, and the rate of those who are taking it is significantly reduced. But it's very important, once you're over 25, every 3 years, you really need to see your GP, or your practice nurse often will do it at the GP practice, to have and it's very simple. It's slightly uncomfortable, but something that,
It's necessary.
It's very necessary.
Necessary.
Because they could pick, once it's done, they can see if there's any changes to the cervix early on and do something about it. And it's done every 3 years. So
Can we dispel some of the misnomers?
yes.
It's not. Is it something you have to do only if you're sexually active?
No, not really.
So you should do it even if you're not sexually active.
Yes. So it just, as soon as you're over 25 anyway, you will actually get a letter from your GP practice, and you'll get a reminder every 3 years.
I saw somebody campaigning for the smear test to be done. This is a cervical smear test to be done from the age of 18 because she contracted an illness at the age of 28.
So it's been looked into to see if younger women could be offered this, especially as young girls are more sexually active these days. So it's still from 25. But if you do request one, it won't be part of the screening program. But especially if you got a family history, it's something you could approach your GP and they could do one earlier.
Then let's talk about our breasts. Yes, even men, you have breasts too that need examining.
Yeah.
So one of the things I was told, and I think this might help people to understand, is somebody said you've got to feel around that area, and then you've got to look for abnormalities. So like nuggets and things like if you're feeling around and imagine your hands in a mashed potato or pounded yam, and then suddenly you feel a hard seed, like a grip.
Yes.
Is that the kind of abnormality one has to look for or feel for?
Over time, especially as soon as you start checking your breasts regularly, you will get to know what your breast feels like. So if there's any changes, any lumps, any changes in how the breasts look, if there's any dimples, anything, any changes in the nipples as well, you should immediately report that to your GP and further tests will be done.
Don't feel uncomfortable. No. It's your body. You've got to look after it, okay?
Definitely. It is.
The other thing I wanted to talk about is now we talk about harmful traditional practices. And I say this because many people, yes, you're in church and you do things, but sometimes there are those things that some people that come from certain cultures get asked to do due to themselves or due to their children. One of those things is female circumcision. And for those of you who don't know what it is, it's where a part of the clitoris or around the labia or other forms of cutting and pulling are carried out around a lady's private area. Now, it's completely illegal in the United Kingdom, but there is this cross-culture conflict that goes on in the sense that those people who do a form of, let me say, adornment that pierce, those people that also do a form of plastic surgery like vaginoplasties to tighten are not readily prosecuted, whereas those people who do the more cultural form of cutting are. And there's been this conflict, but I'm one of those people that will sit down and tell you that don't try it, it's illegal. Don't arrange it, you will go to jail. And even if it's done without your knowledge, you could find yourself in severe trouble. Many people out there will sit down and say, oh, but it's culture, leave them alone.
It is illegal in this country, but not just in this country. You'd be surprised in so many of the countries where it's practiced as a culture.
Now illegal.
It's now, illegal. Yes. Even in Nigeria, it's illegal, but it still happens. And that's the reason why, although many people may say it's part of their culture, it's what it also does to a young girl's body. Sometimes
Correct. The damage.
Yes, and irreversible as well. If once it's cut, you can't. There's nothing you can do about it to restore it, and that's the reason why we educate families, especially if you originate from one of the 29 countries it's practiced in the world. It's through community engagement that we let them know the implications for the young person and involve the community in trying to stop these practices. The psychological damage, I've supported so many women who've had it done, and even sexual activity with one's mate is so painful. Periods are heavy because sometimes, especially with the type 3 one, with infibulation, when everything's cut up and sewn up, stitched up, leaving just a little hole
for
urination and for menstruation. They often have very painful periods, and sometimes the scar tissue. So this is why they are harmful practices. There is no need for any girl, any woman to have that done, and it's illegal in this country. You could face a jail term. That's the reason why we, strongly tell people that you're in the UK, if you have it done to your child, you will go to jail.
Just to let you know, if you feel that you know anyone that's at risk, there are hotlines to call. You can also speak out to professionals. When I say that, think about speaking out towards healthcare professionals. Think about speaking out to police, yes. There has been a lot of backlash. Even today in Wales, I think there was a conference where they said the numbers of girls at risk or portrayed to be at risk is way too high. The real figure is quite low. I'll explain it like this. Number one, though we say it's 28 too many or 29 countries, there are almost 34 countries in which FGM is practiced in different ranging manners. So from Iran, Malaysia, South America, Africa, there are different forms of FGM. That's number one. Number two, you might not know it's going to be planned for you or your child. And this is a thing, it can be done to a child, a baby. It's also done to adult women. There are some women in South Sudan that actually rehab themselves done at their own requests as a sign of rededication to their husbands. And that's, to me, is a form of all different levels of abuse. But that's my opinion. I do not believe a woman should consent to having a procedure done that's so harmful, that's unnecessary. And that's the same with people who carry out excessive forms of adornment to that part of the body. Again, if you're going in for different forms of procedures that are not medically necessary, maybe there's a reason behind your thinking, and that's not necessarily physical but mental. But again, that comes down to practitioners carrying out reasonable assessments of their patients and making sure that when they come in and asking for procedures, they're necessary. But not everybody carries out their duty of care, let's say, to the right degree. There has been, again, as I say, backlash. So some parents have been falsely accused, FGM protection orders handed out on baseless allegations, and that can be quite tricky. What is there in relation to the obligation for the professional to report these issues of not just FGM but other harmful traditional practices?
For a few years now, there is a duty of care for teachers, nurses, midwives, those who come into contact with young girls and young women, and they have a duty to report. Unfortunately, when this first was rolled in, so many professionals who weren't too sure.
Weren't well trained.
Yes, and they weren't too sure what, because a lot of the learning actually happens in a classroom. So unless you actually see it, I was opportune to see what FGM done on a woman was like, because I was a midwife. So, and that was the first time I ever saw it, and I was like, wow, what is this? And that's where the interest developed, yes. So there has been more training now. Unfortunately, sometimes because it's so varied from country to country, it can be quite difficult to confirm. And because of how severe it is, it's against the law. Some professionals have been quite heavy-handed.
Very heavy-handed in some cases. But I guess it's better to be safe than sorry.
Yes.
That's just how it is. So just so that you know, children can be cut as babies nowadays. They say cut them when they're small and they can't talk. So some cultures have now sort of cut at birth even, which is very sad, which is also still very painful for that baby. Then some have symbolic cutting. Some women elect to go back to their countries of origin to have a level of cutting to satisfy marital rights. Some, it varies, as has been said. But the fact is, it's not necessary. You don't need to do it, and it's illegal. But moving on from that, there's also the issue of scarification. Now, we still have people that feel it's necessary to give babies tribal marks. I'm not sure why at all. I do feel it's completely, in my opinion, barbaric, but it's a practice that is still going on.
It's quite sad it still does. And this is why, because it's a culture in some places, it's so hard to change. It's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about parenting, because parenting is often handed down from generation to generation. So people think, oh, I had the tribal marks done. It did me no harm, So
mine look cool.
Yes.
So I want my baby to have the same, or so.
So they do the same. But again, it's deemed child abuse. It's a necessary procedure. So if you have it done, to your child, whether it's you or not, you will be. It's a form of child abuse.
And you could be investigated and face some serious penalties.
Yes.
And not only that, think about the risk of infection. Think about what that could do if infected to your baby's face, the level of disfigurement. So please do think twice. Some of the other things I can sit down and we could talk about, there's the issue of child marriage, bethrowing young children, and the opposite when you have... let's say death rights, when a husband dies and his brothers or male members of the family feel they can take over the wife, and not sometimes just the wife, but other females in the family.
Yes.
These are practices, again, that unfortunately, as westernized as we are, some women face.
Yes. Some women do face it. In fact, I remember a friend who had to, when her father died, it was in the culture for her to marry one of her uncles. And even then, we thought, goodness, in this day and age. But the thing is, if you travel back home, it's the laws of the land that apply. And this is why we have a duty of care to educate people so that young girls are enlightened and they can make these choices. Just like honor-based killings, it's very similar. If you're forced to marry somebody that you haven't chosen to marry. But again, in our culture, marriage is often between families rather than between two individuals. So sometimes some women may feel pressured, or some young girls may feel pressured.
So arranged marriage is not the same as forced marriage.
Yes.
Forced marriage is you will marry this man whether you like it or not.
Hook or by crook.
Hook or by crook. And if you don't, very serious consequences, or you are ostracized from the family. And then there's arranged marriage, where this is how we do things. We're going to introduce you to this person or to that person or to these young suitors. And then we're going to come down to an arrangement if you like the person. So there's a distinct difference. And the Home Office, the government recognises that difference. So forced marriage is not acceptable. Arranged marriage is something that is acceptable.
Yes.
But let's talk about the impact on women emotionally. Most recently, last week, coercive abuse was recognised.
Yes,
finally,
eventually.
into the legislation around domestic violence. And have you experienced that front line? Because still, culturally, so many women and men feel afraid to step up and talk about this.
One of my roles as a health visitor, when you go into the families asking about domestic abuse, it's quite interesting. So many people don't understand what domestic abuse involves. They think it has to involve violence, but it doesn't always have to.
It's not always about this.
No.
Sometimes it's about this.
Yes, it's a mind control. It's all about power and control. And a partner would use anything that he feels he can use, he or she can use. Sometimes it's the children, sometimes it's money, to control. Sometimes it's the friends, the circle of friends and family. All of that now has been acknowledged that it's all various forms of abuse. And as a result, a person can be prosecuted for domestic abuse if one uses any form of control over
financial control.
Yes, any form of control.
Emotional control, that raining down of abuse from the time you wake up, or you stupid this, you've burnt the rice, or you stupid this, you haven't cooked the rice, you stupid this, the rice is too hard. All of that is all deemed as a form of domestic violence. Yes.
And it's so sad. Every week, 2 women in England and Wales are murdered by somebody that they know, either a current partner or a previous partner. And this is why domestic abuse, stalking and harassment laws have been brought into place.
Do you know that one of the things that's important to me, yes, I'm a lawyer and I specialise in harmful traditional practices. I act for parents who are accused. I give advice to government and organisations in relation to the application of legislation, why people are not being prosecuted, etc. But one of the things that always gives me concern is when government is drafting a lot of this legislation and policy, they don't do what I would consider an equality impact assessment. The example I give of that is I spoke to somebody and I couldn't tell them, but I suspected that their partner was abusive. I couldn't tell them for confidentiality reasons. But what I said to them was Clare's Law. But what I realised is that woman did not know what Clare's Law was. And I don't know if that's because of... And then it dawned on me, is that because of lack of government promotion, publicity? And it was just a cultural gap. She had not grown up in the UK. She came at a later age in life. And not only that, Clare's Law, if you watch UK primetime TV, you might know what it is. But if you're watching cultural channels or channels that are not mainstream, the whole Clare's Law might have missed you. It bypassed you. So another thing that we've noticed is some of the government's wonderful policies that they roll out for the benefit of women and men of ethnic origins. Actually, we don't even get to know about it. The information goes past us.
And this is why we do have a responsibility to educate ourselves. If you're in contact with a healthcare professional, it's one of the questions you'll be asked about abuse, as long as your partner is not there
In the room.
Yes, because it's very unfair to be asking that, and you wouldn't get a true answer. Or any consultation, especially if you're pregnant as a midwife, sometimes it's behind the wall of the door, the door, and then you see if you're in an abusive relationship, if you're scared of your partner, sometimes something as little as a red dot, they will tell you to put on a urine specimen. So straight away somebody knows about it. But we do have a duty to we can't just put our blinkers on, especially as it's really hard. If one has grown up in an abusive household, you think that's the norm.
Normalized.
You just think, oh, it's okay.
One of the reasons why I always tell women to leave and men to leave is I say the impact on your children. They will think it's okay. So when their partner says, shut up there, they will say, oh, that's what used to happen. Okay, I'll shut up here. And that's it. I will say to you this. If you're in an abusive relationship and you're being moved or you're being taken out of the country for what you deemed might be forced marriage or FGM, one of the things that we were taught last year is to put a spoon in your underwear or put metal in your pockets and underwear so that you beep. You set off the metal detectors at the airport, and then if you're called to the side for an examination, you say, I need help. You try to mouth, I need help. But if you put a spoon, it's been known as a symbol to recognize that you as a woman are in trouble and at risk of FGM. So there's a little tip for you. Now we're going to take a very short break. And after the break, we're going to come back with a lot more questions to do with our health, our well-being, and also speaking to our MBE, Miss Ruth, and asking more about her book, From In Tune into your baby. So asking about that healthcare that we need to carry out for our young ones as we're carrying them. So see you in a few moments.
When you're looking for a solicitor to deal with your case, you don't just look for any solicitor, you look for the right solicitor. An expert who knows what he's doing can deal with your case the right way, achieving the best results. OBASEKI Solicitors has more than 100 years of specialist experience serving the local community in immigration law, property law, human rights legislation, civil and criminal litigation, family law, employment law, Sharia law, business law, maritime and commercial law, providing professional legal services globally in Africa, Asia and Europe. Be assured we'll be able to deal with your case the absolute right way with results. So contact us today by phone on 020-7739-7549 or go online at www.legalpower.com.
Thank you for staying with us, and I'm still with my special guest, Miss Ruth Oshikanlu, MBE. I'm not going to stop saying it. It rolls off my tongue. MBE. So, yes. And the one thing we're talking about before the break is your wonderful book. Where can people pick this up?
So you could get it on Amazon. That's the quickest way to get a copy. So Amazon, and if you just Google Tune Into Your Baby, because babies don't come with an instruction manual. And that's why I wrote it, because when women, after supporting so many women in childbirth, labour and childbirth, the first thing they'll go, oh, does the baby come with a manual? And I say, your baby's your manual. Your baby tells you how to raise he or she.
What she wants.
Yes.
I can remember my my third baby. I have quite a few. Now, the first one was long labour. I was not so worried. I love children, so I was quite good with babies. And he was very relaxed, but it was a very long labour. And nobody warned me that the drugs that they put in my system could stay there for a day or two.
Yes.
So I was actually sleeping for almost 48 hours afterwards.
They're quite strong drugs.
But nobody tells you this. Busy mums. I did not read up on anything. As far as I was concerned, I know what this is. After 9 months, you push it out and you get on with breastfeeding and etc. So, number one, I slept for 48 hours.
Bless.
Number two, he would not latch on. So I was getting frustrated. Number three, I just then I gave up quite easily and moved to bottle. Number four, my legs swelled up. So it was like one thing after another. And I was at home and I was trying, and my mum was trying, everyone was trying, but none of the things seemed to work, so I was getting frustrated.
Aww.
What do you advise mums who don't really have somebody close by? Back home, mum would move in and everything is taken care of. Maybe somebody else, cousin will come and carry baby. You even just be calling baby for breastfeeding every couple of hours. Or, you know, but here, in a busy Western society, it can be very difficult and it can be very isolating. What advice would you give to mamas and papas out there?
The advice I'll give is just to go with the flow. Sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves. One thing now we have is with especially new parents is perfectionism. They want to be perfect. But this is one time you cannot be perfect. You learn on the job and you learn through failure. You know, you try it, it doesn't work. And you have a baby that really cannot communicate through speech. So this is why I say tune into your baby, observe your baby. So the first few days can be challenging. Be prepared is what I say.
Yes.
So when women, before they go into labour, I say, look, if you could get someone to cook you loads of food and just put them in little containers, so you don't have to worry about feeding, you could sleep. And sleep when baby sleeps, because sometimes it's in the middle of the night they want to
Somebody
play.
told me that only like 2 months in. Sleep when the baby sleeps.
Yes.
And you see, I was up looking at baby, trying to do work.
No. It's a full-time job being a parent, you know. And when you get help, sometimes people also try and prove that there's, you know, super moms, they don't take the offer of help. You know, so if someone offers to help, the only thing that you can do yourself is the breastfeeding. Everything else can be delegated. So,
Yes.
you know, if you have help, you know, get the help and support. Prepare for labour so that when you come back home, you don't have to, because you can never guarantee the outcome of labour. Even with the best plans, you know, a lot of women end up with cesarean sections.
I'm telling you.
Perineal tears.
All kinds of things. And I don't want to talk about any tears because, again, you cannot predict what happens. But I've had a lot of experience. As I said, I've got lots of children. I gave birth to one in a taxi.
Wow. Strong
And
woman.
as I say, that particular child just crawled out by herself, as far as I was not pushing. This child came out. Even the taxi driver was saying, no. Some people in Tottenham, all the way to North Mid that night, had some very, very interesting scenes at the bus stop. They were like, at the traffic lights. But anyway, it was all wonderful. We thank God. Then the final child that I've had, and I say final because I'm not having any more. That shop is closed. Was I'd given birth to the child. Child was healthy. Number one, a lot of the maternity units now are under a lot of pressure.
Yes.
I was asked to go home. I was asked to go home, even though I knew I was in labour, and I'd waited as long as I could at home. And even though I was there, they gave me an examination and said I should go home and come back. And I was like, hold on, honey, I've given birth in a taxi. I know that when my labour comes, it comes like thunder. And they left me in the waiting room by myself. Can you imagine? But, you know, I'm very much so a woman of faith, so I was in prayer, and we thank God baby came fine. But afterwards, the baby's sugar would not regulate. So when I was saying, look, I give birth and I go home, I'm going home, the doctors were like, you're not going home. Baby has to go in an incubator. I was actually debating for the baby with the doctor, saying, how can you prove my baby needs an incubator? Me, I'm going home. The doctor said, I know it's hard, but I give you just 5 minutes to hand me that baby. I was so, again, the emotions, the hormones. I was like, oh God, I will pray this baby was coming home. And the doctor was like, no, this baby needs an incubator now. Again, because I had the support around me, I was able to hand the baby over, floods of tears. And baby had to spend a week or so in intensive care. Any advice you give to mums who face a crisis or a critical decision making after such, giving birth in itself is traumatic. So any advice to mums that have to face critical decision making after giving birth, and dad and parents?
Yes, interestingly, as you mentioned, that I was in hospital for 5 months. They say sometimes when you know too much, it's a bad thing.
It's a bad thing. Oh, you start debating, even debating with yourself when you know too much info.
5 months into my pregnancy, I was admitted to hospital and I never made it home again. And so in the end, he was born at 34 weeks prematurely. And it wasn't a pleasant experience, even with the best knowledge. you're a mom first and this is your baby. That's someone saying. I remember when I had him, because I still had an epidural, I couldn't walk.
Oh.
So in the middle of the night, I woke up, touched my belly, and because it was such an exhausting labor, I thought, I can't remember, did I have a baby last night?
Hey.
And then I rubbed my belly.
Just to check. Where's the baby?
Because there was a bassinet
Wow.
there, and the bassinet was empty.
See.
I'm like, so I pressed the emergency buzzer, because this is an emergency. Someone
Where's
stole
my
my
baby? Uh-huh.
And they said, no, he's not stolen. It's in special care. I said, I'm going there now. In the end, they had to get a wheelchair because
You couldn't walk.
I couldn't walk, but I was on a mission to get there. I don't care.
Whether you crawl.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And as soon as I got to special care, he was intubated.
Oh.
You know, they put him unconscious, you know, and to ventilate him. And I had a big wail. So for any woman who's going through, or man as well, because it was hard as well for both of us, because seeing your baby that you long for, you know,
Yeah.
almost lifeless, you know, being supported with a machine, it's not easy.
Not easy.
But all the professionals in special care, in the neonatal intensive care unit, they're all
They
trained.
know what they're doing.
They trained, you know, and as hard as it is, yes, prayer, definitely. Prayer was a big thing, you know. That's why we gave him the name, because we just felt it was God that supported us to have him. So, you know, there's so much support. Never go by yourself. And other parents, often there's not just one child in intensive care, there's other parents. So because they're going through it, they were also very good support network.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of them we still remain in contact with, because the boys were all born at the same time, around the same time. So ensure you never feel by yourself. Either professional support, the support of other parents in the intensive care unit can be very valuable, because they're going through it. Sometimes you see parents who've had a baby there for much longer, and they'll come and console you.
That's what happened with me. I had a lot of parents giving me reassurance whose babies had a lot more complex situations than mine.
Most
Started making me feel grateful. And when you talk about the professionals knowing what they're doing, I remember the doctor couldn't find a vein because the baby's veins were so small. And he said there's one nurse in this hospital that is always able to get a vein. And they paged her, and she came running. And that was after 3 people tried to, and she came. And I thought, he's so small, you can't do it. Let me just take him. You can't put a cannula in him. He's too small. This lady came, and within a few seconds, this lady, and I actually looked, and I thought to myself, Lord, thank you. There are people that are that highly skilled. And she wasn't a doctor. The doctors called this particular petite nurse just to come in because she was an expert at doing that. Now, I know we've been going through a lot, very fast and very rapid, but if you have questions and you do want to call in, I've asked them to put the number on the screen. And believe me, between Ruth and I, there's nothing we haven't heard. So if you're a bit shy, you can actually get through to Ruth on LinkedIn. Her name is on the screen, so that's how you'll find her on LinkedIn. If you ever need her to answer a few queries, or you'd like her to come and train or speak for you, then wonderful, you can catch her there. And myself, with regards to harmful traditional practices, if you ever need help, advice, if you've been accused falsely, if you've been accused and you just need help, yes, I'm able to help you. Also in regards to training frontline professionals who have to be aware of the legal consequences of some of these harmful traditional practices. It's something that we do regularly.
Most definitely.
And I'd like to reassure you that you're not alone in a lot of the things that you might hear us talk about. We don't say this to give shock effect. We do these programs to give information. A lot of people, I do say to you, I'm very concerned because I put on one of my posts on a page that I run called Professionals Against Gender-Based Violence. I put a picture of breast ironing, and that's something that's not so well known about. It's a practice that's done in Africa where girls' breasts are actually pressed to be flattened, and it's for, again, cultural reasons. It's not medically necessary. It's quite painful. It's disfiguring. And somebody who responded, who was another professional, saying, you shouldn't put that on your wall. And I explained that it's informative. And this person was a healthcare professional, and I said to them, have you ever seen breast ironing? And the fact that you haven't seen it is why I put it there. Because a lot of professionals that practice in Western world haven't seen a lot of the harmful traditional practices that they're asked to provide medication and care towards.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I don't think any information is too much, and I often will put things, especially on my wall. I tend to, because I find a lot of my friends are not aware. So I share statistics. I go through the calendar and look at different dates in the year where things are celebrated. You know, World AIDS Day, FGM Day, February 6th, you know. So I go through and I put it, and it's interesting how it stimulates conversation.
Yes,
and then I'm
that's the
able to
point.
answer questions. And even where people were not aware, they go, goodness, I never knew about this. You know, and I also put in different forums where there's other midwives or health visitors. Because again, depending on where you live, you may not be aware that these things happen. Because if you're in a city, you will probably see different people from different ethnicities.
Yes.
Or if you're in a rural part of England or Scotland or Wales, you may not necessarily see those things. So those things foster conversations.
Yes.
So that we could actually, oh, I never knew about it. Tell me more.
It's all about creating best practice and awareness. You can't say that you're a midwife in, let me say, Norfolk, and suddenly, as you probably are aware, lots of migrants, asylum seekers are actually moved out to those areas because of housing. And then suddenly you're in the thrust of having lots of different women. Some have had FGM, some have had breast ironing, and you're trying to give them healthcare, quality healthcare, but you've never seen these things before. It's important that as frontline professionals, ask questions. There are people here like us that are able to help you, give you information about things. I didn't know about labia elongation until I came to the UK.
Yes, and in some parts I see it as aesthetically that it looks beautiful. You
Exactly.
know, but it's a form of FGM.
It's a form of FGM too. So that's a practice in sub-Saharan Africa where girls are encouraged to pull and
stretch
elongate their libias. And this is something that, you know, I found it confusing when I first learnt about it. Asked some of my friends who were from that region, and yes, told me that they were encouraged to pull as they were growing up. Some people say it helps stimulate sexual pleasure. Some people actually feel now uncomfortable with it and feel disfigured with it. And other people, as you said, feel it looks lovely. So again, if you're a midwife or you're a healthcare professional and you're first presented with something like that, you would have to know what to do for ladies having repeated infections as a result of that, didn't know what to do. If it was the subject of a divorce proceedings, how would you put that in the papers? Would it be something, and you know, how do you put these things forward? So again, it's interesting.
It is
say.
interesting.
And it's, even as professionals, we continue to grow and learn, and it's not like we've reached the pinnacle of anything. It's an evolving thing. One of the things that I teach is the evolution of FGM, how the practice is changing. Is there anything else that's current and trending that you might feel that healthcare professionals should be made aware of?
Well, with all the piercings we're having, people tend
Piercings and tattoos.
People tend to feel that it's, you know, it's a trend now where people are piercing their genitals as well, not just their tongue or their noses, you know,
their ears,
so
or their eyebrows.
So as a result, it has had to be reclassified. So the type 4 is anything that any
really.
kind of piercing or stretch, tattoo, you know, anything. Yes. So sometimes you see
tattoo. Did you say?
Yes, some people tattoo everything. Yeah. It's all part of doing, you know, anything that changes the shape or appearance of the genitals in any way. And this is why people need to be aware. Because it's the law.
It's the law.
It's the law. Yes, and I just wanted to touch on physical chastisement, because that's often where, when I worked with African communities, in fact, I remember going into one household. They were from Nigeria, and we'd been engaging until he mentioned that, oh, I beat him when he's naughty, and I had to say, ooh, we're in the UK. And he actually called me a traitor because I had to work with the family and say, look, we're in the UK, the laws are different. spanking is not prohibited, but beating, as you said, with your belt is. And so a report had to be made, and unfortunately the child was taken away. So we have a duty. We're not saying don't discipline your children, but actually what I find, and this is why I am so passionate about parenting, attachment. You know, when you bond with your child, you get to know your child, you know what makes your child tick, and you find out you would not have to physically smack that child as often as it was done to us when we were being raised. Sometimes children misbehave for different reasons. Sometimes it's attention seeking behavior.
Yes.
Sometimes it's also because we've not educated them, especially in the teenagers. They tend to experiment.
Boundaries.
So we need to educate our children. We often don't talk about sex, we don't talk about substance misuse, and we don't often focus on their physical health and almost ignore their emotional health and the psychological well-being.
Yes.
So as parents, we need to make time to understand our children. So
Do
we
you
know what
think?
makes them
Do you think it's because us parents are uncomfortable talking about those things?
Yes, definitely. That's a part of it. But the beauty of the internet, there's so many websites that are designed for parents to know how to broach the subject. We need to be talking about these things. A growing problem, especially in London and other big cities, is child sexual exploitation and child criminal exploitation, where kids are exploited either for sex or for criminal activity. And if we do not talk to our young kids about this, those who want to exploit them will talk to them.
You know, it's one of those things that I always say, if you don't talk to them about it, somebody's going to talk to them about it. And sadly, where certain gangs have a very, very successful grooming pattern, they will know how to make your child dependent on them, reliant on them, strike up the conversation with them, give them a little bit of attention, or try to give them a level of information that benefits them. So when it comes down to, oh, your parents, probably they're too busy, they don't really have time for you, they don't care about you. We can give you some money to get yourself a new jacket, a pair of new shoes. A pair of new shoes becomes you owe them now. And then from owing them, it can lead to 101 roads all down the wrong path. Whether it becomes, as you've said, sexual exploitation, whether it becomes them engaged in criminal behavior. And I wrote a very important topic. Well, I wrote an article about this. It's on LinkedIn, and it's about gang crime being a form of gender-based violence due to the level of black men that are at risk in relation to gang crime in London. It's in London and inner cities, it's a 50-50 whether your child falls within gang activity or not. And that's not down to sometimes you being a bad parent. That's down to just the nature of our lifestyles and the fact that these grooming gangs are successful in their modus operandi, the way that they've structured things, the way that they'll target your child if you don't have the time to spend with your child, the way that they'll get your child to do certain activities. It's scary, but the fact is, sadly, many young people have been used and abused by the gangs and feel entrapped. They feel entrapped, and if you don't reach out as a parent and let them know that that door's always open for any topic of conversation, that door is always open. No matter what you've done, you can come back home. Those streets will take your child if you don't, and that's just the way it is. So if you're finding it hard to talk about certain topics with your child, there are lots of agencies out there. There are lots of intervention agencies. You will be surprised at the level of help you actually will get. And if you're not getting help, reach out to me. I will find people that can help you. There's, just rolling off my tongue, there's 100 Black Men of London, there's the Black Child Agenda, there's Families First. There's so many intervention agencies out there, believe me. And if you're not getting help, reach out to me. I'll make sure that I connect you with one.
Excellent.
So, now, before we actually push that baby out, what should we be doing? Now, I'm very lucky. My pregnancies are very easy, but the last one, hey, I don't know. The last one, my hip kept coming out of joint, and I actually was on crutches from like 4 months. My goodness. But what can we do as mums, apart from eat healthy? What recommendations will you give us in nurturing and bonding with our babies?
So many. So good antenatal care, sleep well, eat well, exercise, rest. Try to take away worry and stress and anxiety as much as you can. We know more now about the effect of stress hormones on the baby, especially on brain development.
Wow.
So it's very important. You can eliminate stress, but reduce it as much as possible. And if you're in employment, you've got loads of rights. So let your employer know. They'll always ask if reasonable adjustments can be made. So, if you're working shifts or you're standing up, there's things you can ask for, little changes to make it easier
for you.
Yes.
And if they don't give you those changes, come and talk to me. I'll be more than happy to help you.
But good antenatal care, unfortunately, because sometimes the laws, how they make it difficult if you're not a citizen or entitled to NHS care. We're having an increase.
People present late.
Very late. Concealed
they've
pregnancy.
missed out.
They've missed out. So no one's even checked their baby. They've not done any blood tests. And often they seem to have more problems with mother and with baby. But it is important, even though you may feel you're not entitled to it, to seek help. No one's going to turn you away.
No one's going to turn you away. If you're not documented and you're pregnant, number one, nobody's going to turn you away. Number two, if you can't afford the care that you need because you're not eligible, there are certain things that you could try to do. There are Doctors Without Borders that you can see. They're in East London. Then also, you can come to a payment plan with the NHS. You can pay instrumentally for the next 10 years, so far as you are paying. And this is something that you must do. Your health comes first, and baby's health comes before yours. So it's important that you do present as early as possible so that you can get those necessary urgent tests. A lot of the screening that's done in your first trimester and second trimester pick up abnormalities with the fetus. So it's so important that you do go in for these checks. And as I've said, if you feel so afraid, try to get them done, even if you can try and get them done privately, but get them done, because the screening that's done there is vital.
For your health and your baby's well-being.
So it's so important that people get to know these things. You were talking about the blood tests, and I am one of those people that also guilty of going in late. Going in and nurses like, where have you been? This is 4 or 5 months. What have you been? And often, as I'm a self-employed mum, and yes, I know I'm not Wonder Woman, Superwoman, but sometimes it's just time. Is there any suggestions you can give us mums who are often self-employed and juggling as to what to do?
I'm a self-employed single mum too, but the beauty of a phone now is you can set alerts. So my phone is full of alerts. Tomorrow I have a dental appointment. If I don't, often when I set an alert, I'll set myself a 24-hour reminder so that it's not on the day. I'll set a 24-hour reminder, I'll set a 5-hour reminder, and another 2-hour reminder, so that I know I'm working my way. But it's very important. It's so sad. There was a new recent report that came out, the Embrace report, and it says black women are 5 times more likely to die in pregnancy or childbirth in comparison with white women. Wow. And some of the issues are to do with not presenting early. We think we've had 4 children, 5 children, and they were fine. So this won't be fine. But every time you have a pregnancy,
everyone is different.
Yeah, and
take it from me. I've had 5. Every pregnancy is different.
Exactly. So sometimes we make those assumptions. Oh, it was easy. I just pushed the baby out, or it was fine the first time. But as our bodies age, sometimes problems we may not have had with previous pregnancies, we can develop. So it's very important. Those checks are there for a reason, to pick up problems early and to do something about it. So your health is your wealth. So please Do not ignore it. Do not neglect it.
Yes, and
Yeah.
ladies who have not been successful in pregnancy,
Oh, yes.
let me also have the last word for you.
Yeah.
Be encouraged. Be very encouraged. My last pregnancy, I was told I wouldn't have children, and I had cysts. And believe you me, somehow Angel Gabriel dropped something there. So I ended up having a baby. But what would you say to those ladies that are still struggling, still trying to conceive?
Please get help again. It saddens me because, especially with IVF, there's an age limit. Once you're over 40, you won't get IVF. So, and sometimes we don't talk about these issues. We hide the problems until it's almost too late.
Not just prayer, but you actually have to take action.
Exactly. So
Okay.
find out the reasons why you and your partner, find out why you can't conceive. Because sometimes it's just small, there's simple reasons
Simple
that,
adjustments.
yes, that can be done and treated. But when you leave it too late, then you limit the chances. So yes, pray, but seek help so you could get the support you need to conceive.
Well,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining
Yes.
us. I'm so thrilled. And thank you also for staying with us. And I hope you really enjoyed the show. In the forthcoming shows, we're going to talk about men's health. So don't think I'm leaving you out, fellas. Daddies, uncles, sons, I'm going to come for you and have some guests in to talk to you about your health. Thanks once again. And as I say, I'm going to see you next week. And be good. If you can't be good, be careful. Take care. Bye-bye.
When you're looking for a solicitor to deal with your case, you don't just look for any solicitor, you look for the right solicitor. An expert who knows what he's doing can deal with your case the right way, achieving the best results. OBASEKI Solicitors has more than 100 years of specialist experience serving the local community in immigration law, property law, human rights legislation, civil and criminal litigation, family law, employment law, Sharia law, business law, maritime and commercial law, providing professional legal services globally in Africa, Asia and Europe. Be assured we'll be able to deal with your case the absolute right way with results. So, contact us today by phone on 020-7739-7549 or go online at www.legalpal.com.